So like what it's taught me with Albert and with Wayno and Yadi is like the same way you prepare to have a conversation with those guys, Mason Wynn deserves the same level of attention to detail and preparation when I have a conversation with him. Like he deserves that. Jordan Walker deserves that. So like you learn to prepare in a way that you can have a conversation with a Hall of Famer, and you prepare the same way for that rookie because one day, hopefully, he's in those same shoes.
On today's episode of Show and Go with X, we have St. Louis Cardinals manager Oliver Marmol. Ollie talks about what it's like being the youngest manager in the game right now. He discusses what it's like building a clubhouse culture with legends like Albert Pujols, Yadier Molina, and Adam Wainwright. And ultimately, we get into the obstacles of the 2023 season for the Cardinals. Show and Go starts now.
Oliver Marmol, St. Louis Cardinals manager. I'm gonna get right into it. I'm not gonna fool around. This is Show and Go. We get right to business. Why be a manager? Why be a coach? What led you along your journey to say, okay, this is what I want to do? And when was that? Because we go back to playing days, playing together early in the minor leagues. I remember the work ethic. I remember you doing your thing as an infielder. But I didn't know you were going to be a manager one day. So what led you to that point?
Well, they told me to stop playing pretty early, so that's part of it. But even when I was a player, man, it's towards the end of my career, I started to really have a passion for having an influence over a team, over just a group of guys. And I just remember listening to different guys come and speak to the team, and one of them being Tony LaRussa, and he came and spoke. And I remember being on the backfield, and I'm listening to what he's telling the guys and what he looks for in players. And the whole time I'm listening to him speak from the view of a coach and not a player. And I was thinking, man, one day I want to use that, and I want to be able to speak like that and do what he's doing. And I knew that I was getting a lot closer to wanting to coach than I was playing. So later on that year, I believe it was 2010, they made the decision for me. They released me. And I started my career about 2 weeks later as a coach in Batavia, New York. Yeah.
Batavia, New York, that's not an easy place
That's real.
to start coaching. But what was it that you wanted to have influence on? Like, because I think that's an important word, because I think about whatever platform I'm on as a player or even after playing, I would like to have influence on specific people I would come around, and that influence I want it to look like, reflect the type of person I am.
No doubt.
So why was that influence important for you?
There's nothing better than seeing someone achieve what they're set out to do, right? So like just being able to play a part in different guys' lives on and off the field and seeing them achieve their goals is awesome, man. So like it's one thing to be a player. I enjoyed being a player. I don't miss it. Like I truly have more of a when you hit 200.
I feel the same. No, I feel the same way.
You hit 200 4 years in a row. You don't miss that a bit. But as a coach, man, it's so cool to sit back and watch other guys reach their goals and see them do life away from the field and be able to speak into both areas. So that part of it really drives me. I'm passionate about it. And at the end of the day, I'm having a heck of a lot more fun managing and coaching guys than I did playing.
Yeah, I guess I would go from there, because I looked at coaching and I'm kind of like, okay, these coaches at the field, way too long. Like, no, literally that was like, after I got done playing, I'm like, okay, maybe coaching could be next. And then I'm like, no, my coaches were there. The managers were there from 11, 10 a.m. sometimes until the end of the game. If it's 7 p.m. game, you're done at 10, 11 o'clock. What about that is tough? Because I look at it and I'm like, obviously family's important. I know family's important to you. How do you kind of navigate, being away at times? Because that's got to be one of the toughest parts.
It's by far the toughest. And if you look at just families in general, and just marriages in this game, it's tough, man. And you have to be really intentional about how you're navigating that whenever you have a job as a coach or as a manager at the big league level. And it's something that my wife and I are super intentional about. When you look at the hours that you're at the field, you said it, you're there at 10:30, 11 o'clock, you're there till midnight, and you don't get to spend, something has to give, and it's usually family.
Some sacrifice.
Especially if you want to do it well. So being intentional with your time away from the field is the key to all of it. I got a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and being able to really be present when I'm at home. And that's the toughest thing, right? You get your brains beat in, you lose a tough game, you get in the car, you're driving home, and being able to switch to being dad and being
Yeah,
husband is
right.
one of the toughest things, right? So I wasn't really good at it early on. I think I've gotten a lot better at it, but once I'm
Even
home,
before you started managing?
even before going back to playing, like
Yeah.
it's just you have a tough game and you bring it home, and it's one of the toughest things not to do. But I've gotten to the point where once I leave the stadium, I'm present, I'm home, I'm dad, and as soon as I click it back on and I'm at the stadium, like I'm managing the club, and I'm locked into that. But at the end of the day, I think the thing that's going to be most important and the thing that you're going to be most proud of is being a good dad and being a good husband.
Yeah.
All of this goes away.
Right,
It does.
right.
No matter how important you think it is in the moment, and you want to do a good job. I'm honored to be the manager of the Cardinals, but when this all ends, being dad and being husband is going to be the thing that has a lasting legacy.
Yeah. Well, I even, I think about as a player, even whatever industry it may be in, you have days where you struggle. And sometimes those days where you have short patience goes home with you. And, and it's hard to get over that. But at the same time, like you said, the more you're able to recognize that and say, okay, let me be intentional about just kind of putting that to the side is important. And it's a day by day basis. It'll never be an easy thing.
No, this is the first year. I remember coming home. It was a tough loss. We had plenty of them this year. And I get home and my 6-year-old comes up to me and she says, "Dad, you didn't win today, did you?" And it clicked. Like, man, I'm carrying it back to the house. Like, if she can tell if I won or lost, then I'm not doing it well.
Right.
If I can get home and she has no idea what took place at the stadium, then that's when I'm doing it well. So you check yourself from time to time. You just said it. It's day to day, and you want to make sure you're checking yourself and you have your priorities straight. I get paid to win.
Yeah.
But when I'm home,
You gotta be dad.
I'm dad. Yeah.
No, that's important. I think that's something that we lose sight of a lot of times, especially when you're an outsider looking in, because everybody's so used to seeing you in that uniform, right? And so used to the cameras always on you and your reactions and emotions and whatnot. And it's funny for me because I've kind of seen the process of you get to that point. And I'm sure there's been a lot of factors that have helped you kind of get to that point, and obstacles and highs and lows. For you, I want to go back to even the minor league days when you were coaching. Did you realize you wanted to be a major league manager, or was that something that was always a goal? Because sometimes guys have a goal as to, okay, maybe I want to get in the front office, maybe I want to touch coaching to see if I can get somewhere else, player development. Was managing always like an ultimate goal for you?
It wasn't. I never had a goal of I want to manage at the big league level by this age or by this time. It was I want whatever I was doing, I wanted to do it well. And as I started to climb through being a hitting coach for a year, and then I started managing, I believe in 2012, and I think I was 24 years old or so, and I was way in over my head. And I had some really good mentors come alongside of me and teach me what this looks like and how to hold a clubhouse and it was never a goal to like, all right, I'm gonna climb up and I want to be the manager. I just wanted to make sure that whatever I was doing it well, and I was serving the organization in a way that I can be proud of and they were proud of. And one thing led to another, and you hold that seat now. But it was never something that I was like aspiring, like I want to be able to do this one day. I'm glad to be able to do it now. Yeah.
Who you talk a little bit about those mentors? Who were some of the biggest influences on you to get to where you are at this moment? Because I think it's important to mention you being the youngest manager, right? At the time in which you were hired, there has to be an area of which people have helped you to get to that point to where someone can say, okay, it doesn't matter the age or it doesn't matter the ultimate experience, but he's here for a reason. And there's got to be people that have helped you get to that point.
A lot. I was very intentional. If I was going to be around certain people, man, I was going to extract as much information from them as possible in order to bring value to whatever I was doing. And I had some really good people away from the game and people in the game that were able to speak into my life professionally and off the field to allow me to be a better leader. At the end of the day, that's what this is all about, right? You're leading men, you're gaining their trust, and being able to all head in the same direction. And there's people outside of the game that did a really good job of showing me what that looked like, that were very successful in the business world. And in the baseball world, man, I had a ton of different people, from the Matheny's of the world to the Mark DeJongs, to the Gary LaRussa, to the Mike Shildt. I mean, I can go down the list of guys that were super intentional about showing me what this looked like, so that if this opportunity ever presented itself, that I can roll with it. And they spent a lot of time making sure that I was ready. Yeah.
I guess, you talk about the former managers, Matheny, Shildt. What specific characteristics or specific things were they able to pass on to you that allowed you to say, okay, I think I'm ready for this, right? Or this is something that I want to be able to take hold of? Because I think two things. You speak high on leadership of men, right? That's one of the toughest things to really do, is command a group of people and lead them into one area. I'm wondering, what was the things that you learned that allowed you to say, okay, this is something I can move forward with?
From different guys that have managed the club, you learn the different levels of preparation and what it really takes. Like when you talk about attention to detail, you said showing up at 10 a.m., 10:30 in the morning, you're here till midnight. Like those hours that you spend on the field aren't wasted. There's so much attention to detail to make sure that when you lay down at night, that you feel good about what just took place, whether you won or lost. All right, you have to feel good about looking in the mirror and going, did I bring it today? Did I do everything possible? And there's a level of preparation that I learned from those guys that has allowed me to just do my job differently. Empathy. This game is hard. And if you forget that, you lose guys pretty quickly. You have to remember that this game is extremely difficult. The guys across the way are equally as good, and they're getting paid to do the same. So having empathy when guys aren't doing well. You sit back as a coach and you watch guys manage and you go, man, he handled that situation really well.
Right.
Especially when everyone on the outside is coming down on somebody for something. You have empathy on that player and you gain their trust and you have their back. So you get to see what this really looks like when the pressure isn't on you as the manager, when you're just a coach and you're observing, so that when it is on you, you're able to do it well.
Yeah. You say pressure, and I think everybody takes that differently, right? Yeah. But I think the one thing we all recognize with managers is you said it earlier, you have to win.
Yeah.
And there's always preconceived notions about a personality who's in the managing chair.
Sure.
I think that's obvious when we look at different people in the game. But for you, how do you deal with pressure specifically? And when I say pressure, I'm talking about maybe the pressure that comes from outside, like media, and what they think of you or what they think of the team and whatnot. How do you deal with that personally?
I think a lot of people lie about how they handle pressure. Like we all experience it. Some of us process it differently. But to say that it doesn't affect you one way or another, that's a lie. And anybody that sits here and tells you
you're just able to block it out.
That's nonsense. I mean, if they get real with you and start talking through the conversations that they have when they're back at their house and how they handle it, we all handle and have to deal with pressure. It fuels me. I don't think I would wake up to do the job if the expectations weren't extremely high. It wouldn't interest me anymore. So when the stakes are high, especially in St. Louis, you're expected to win every game, every year.
Yeah.
That's what wakes you up in the morning. When you talk about the great players, they like that pressure. They want the game on the line. They want that situation. So for me, I enjoy the pressure. I do. Is there times where I think we could get into this, but there's a difference between pressure and criticism, and we can talk about the two and how they're different. But the pressure and the expectations being high in St. Louis is what wakes me up in the morning and gets me going. If the expectation wasn't to win, I'm not sure I would do it.
Yeah.
At that point, what's at stake? So I love it. I process it in a way where it fuels me. So yeah.
Yeah, I think knowing you as a person and just knowing that being in a position in which people expect certain things out of you, expectations is something that can push someone like you. And it pushes someone like me too, because whether you're trying to prove somebody wrong or you have a chip on your shoulder, I think that's something that gives guys a little edge.
Yeah.
Edge is something that you definitely have. We see it with ejections and whatnot. We'll touch on that at another point. But I saw you in London this year.
Yeah.
This past year in 2023,
Yeah.
Cardinals got the opportunity to go to London. I think you mentioned, I just thought about this. You mentioned something to me like, I like doubt, like when people doubt you sometimes. And I think that with criticism comes doubt a lot of times.
No doubt.
So what about that kind of like allows you to say, let me use that? Because a lot of people can fold under that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that I recognize in you that I love. It's like, you're not going to back down from situations that in which most people are like, okay, you know what, maybe I'm going away from that.
Yeah, criticism and doubt. I mean, there's plenty of it in this game. If you want to feel encouraged, wake up in the morning, search your name on Twitter. It'll do the job. But here's the reality of how I process it. If you want to stop learning, become defensive. That's the way I view it. The second you become defensive and you're trying to defend everything that people are saying, you're really not listening. You're really not hearing them. And you have to have thick skin in allowing people to speak into certain situations that you may not want to hear. But that's where growth comes from. So the second you become defensive and you shut people out and you become callous, it's difficult to learn. Now, there's a difference between what happens in the Twitter world and the people walking the streets in St. Louis. And I can tell you, walking the streets in St. Louis, people have been unbelievable to myself, my wife, my kids. Are there expectations to win? Absolutely. Are they higher than the ones we have for ourselves? No.
Yeah.
So what I would say is I handle criticism in a way where I welcome it. I'm able to filter it. Does it piss you off from time to time? Absolutely. Like, you're human.
Yeah.
But the second you become defensive and you stop listening to what people are saying, I think you stop growing, you stop learning.
Wow.
So the stakes are high. It's part of the job. Like, people are going to hate you. In leadership, people are going to love you and some people are going to hate you.
Yeah.
And hopefully over time you gain people's trust for them to know your heart and who you really are, and that you're making decisions that are for the organization and not for yourself. But it's definitely a tough balance.
Well, everybody has an opinion nowadays. Like,
You think?
I think that's, to me, that's one of the toughest things is like,
It is.
And that's why I created this show too, is because no matter somebody else's opinion, I always want to hear it from the athlete, the manager, the person in the industry themselves.
Yeah.
That way the narrative is created around them the right way and around the truth.
No doubt.
And I think that in today's Twitter world, today's social media world, in which we can be branded so many different ways, a lot of times we don't get the personality of a manager. And that's why I'm grateful to sit down with you, because I think that that's something that I want people to see. I want people to see the Ollie that I know too.
Sure.
So how do you deal with kind of the brand of yourself as a person, and what you want out there, or even if you care about that?
No, you do care about it because you want people to know who you really are, and not just the callous version of answering questions post game.
Yeah, and that's all we. That's
the version
will know,
everybody gets,
right?
Yeah, and there's only so much you can give, right? In protecting the player or the organization, or decisions that I've made, or other like things that happen throughout the game that you don't want out there. Like, there's only so much you can say, and a lot of times you give these canned answers that you wish you can elaborate on, but for the sake of everything else, you don't. So perception is, hey, you're the guy making decisions, and this is what I think his personality is like compared to what it looks like in real life.
Right.
But am I concerned with it? Not a ton. I mean, you have a job to do, but it is good to sit here and be able to talk freely about certain things that you don't get to normally when you're doing certain media sessions.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the relationship is a big part of that, right? Like, in a sense, you're always getting questions of, a lot of times, criticism or somebody's opinion. And I think it's important to kind
You're supposed to, right? Like, for me, like, that's their job. Everyone has a job to do.
Right.
And like, being able to present criticism or their point of view on a decision that was made is their job. And it's my job to keep my cool and answer the question. And from a fan standpoint, you should be passionate and hate certain things when they don't go well and get excited when they do go well. Like that is being a fan, right? So my job and my seat is to wear it when it doesn't. And then move on when it does, because you're on to the next thing. So it's just, I mean, I'm okay with like that is part of the description of holding this seat. Yeah.
And I think that's what's cool about St. Louis is you have a passionate fan base and a nationwide fan base that is really passionate about their team. And I think, you know, a lot of times it kind of what you mentioned earlier on is like, if that wasn't the case, like, would that wake you up and be so, you know, so adamant to perform every day, you know? So I think that that's one of the great things about St. Louis. Let me ask you a little bit about a word that we hear all the time, and it's clubhouse culture.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, I guess not just as a young manager, but as a new manager anyway.
Yeah.
How do you go about building the culture that you're looking towards building? Or how do you go about keeping a culture that was already built? Is that something that you kind of think about or try to implement?
Absolutely. And a couple things come to mind. When I got the job, I want everybody to know where I stand when it comes to my philosophy as a manager. Okay. And there's two words that I truly believe in for how I make decisions and filter decision making and just how I operate. And those are honesty and curiosity. And those two mean a great deal to me. And honesty, what I mean by that is my ability to be honest with myself. Am I bringing it every day? And then being honest with others. And sometimes that means having tough conversations and saying things that need to be said even when you don't want to.
Right.
But also carrying myself in a way where others are comfortable being honest with me. And that means a staff member, that means a player. If I'm doing something that doesn't jive with our mission of getting to where we want to get to, you should be able to come into my office and tell me.
Yeah. So honesty working both ways.
Honesty has to work both ways. And then curiosity is just, man, is this the best way to do this? Are we doing it this way because we've always done it this way? Am I missing something? Is there an improved version of this that we're not looking at? So if you're constantly being honest and then seeking a better way of doing things, I think it's a good way to operate. Now, when you talk about clubhouse culture, it all comes down to trust. And one thing you'll hear in our clubhouse a lot is, can you be trusted? And that means on and off the field. Like, are you going to put in the work to be trusted?
Right.
Are you going to be mentally tough enough when things aren't going your way or our way? Are you going to be trusted? Are you going to go on an island by yourself and just worry about you? So there's a lot of things that go into culture, but for us, for me, honesty and curiosity are extremely important, and then trust. And can you be trusted plays into that.
I love that, because a lot of times we hear the words like culture, right? And nobody really defines what that culture is. And I appreciate you kind of defining what that means to you. And that makes sense as a former player, because curiosity, honesty, trust, all those things you need within a team working towards one goal. And that's not just within a clubhouse, that's in so many group type of activities or whatever in which you're trying to win. So
I think about it as a player, like, you always wanted to know where you stood as a player. Like, you don't want to come into the clubhouse guessing where you stand.
And but that's not easy too, you know. Like going to your manager or going to a specific coach saying, hey, where am I at?
Yeah.
And sometimes those conversations are extremely tough.
They are. I mean, I'll tell you, tough conversations that prep you for any conversation, and try managing your first year and having Hall of Famer number 5, Albert Pujols, in that clubhouse. And I mean, this guy's phenomenal. He was incredible to me.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of honesty back and forth as to, hey, what does my role look like? Hey, this week, what do you have for me? Are we facing the lefty? Am I going to get the righty? I've hit this guy before. I know it's right on right, but I feel good against him. And you're constantly going back and forth. And it just develops this ability to be honest, where you feel like you can be honest with anybody. So that's why that word is extremely important, because I think if you operate off of it, a lot of good things do happen. And you do end up gaining the trust of the player and of your staff members. And it's easier to just navigate some of the tough things that come along when you play 162 games together.
Wow. No, that's good. And I'm wondering now, at a point where we're 2024, you're moving towards some of those huge clubhouse personalities that have been with the Cardinals for a long period of time are not in the clubhouse.
Yeah.
Adam Wainwright, you mentioned Pujols,
Yeah.
Yachty, of course. So does that make it tougher at all, or is that something to where it's like I don't need to worry about that because I like where my clubhouse is at, or is that what are the thoughts behind that?
For me, it's not that it's not a concern because those are staples to this organization for the last 2 decades.
Yeah,
right?
long time.
So to sit here and say no, that doesn't matter would be dumb.
Yeah.
What I do think good leaders do, and I'm speaking of the Alberts and Yachty's and Waynos, is they instill certain values in the culture that once they're no longer there, it still stands. And they pour into the next generation of players in a way where, man, like now they get to lead.
Yeah.
When you don't lead well, if they didn't do their jobs, then things would crumble quickly. But I do think those guys did a really nice job of instilling what this looks like, what winning looks like into the next generation of players. And now those players get to step up and it's tough. But it's their turn to do it.
Right, right. And that's an opportunity for them, right?
doubt.
To kind of build their own name for themselves. And
Yeah.
I think that a lot of times we get lost in the big words of the Cardinal Way, and right, who kind of passes that on.
Yeah.
And I think that doesn't get passed on without guys stepping up. So I think that that's important to mention. I want to talk to you about another word that is kind of cliche at times, is analytics. Like, we talk so much about the data-driven activity within our game. First, I'll ask you, where are you with analytics? Because I will say the notion may be with the former manager who left, and Mike Shildt, that there was some differences there.
Sure.
So does that mean Ollie all of a sudden takes every analytic thing from up top and inserts it into the game? Where are you with analytics?
When I hear the word analytics, it's you're compiling a ton of information and streamlining it in order to make it simple and actionable, right? So like, we would be dumb not to want information prior to making decisions.
Right.
So I think it's a polarizing conversation because people like saying, oh, I hate analytics, or old school versus new school. It's neither. It's, man, like, you're using a ton of information to help you make decisions that are sustainable over time.
Right.
And when you look at the game, you have to remember you're dealing with humans that have a heartbeat, that experience pressure and anxiety, and some handle the moment a certain way, some don't. So it's great to have this information. You use it,
Right.
but at the same time, all you're doing is applying it to what you know and your eyes see and your gut tells you. So when it comes down to it, yeah, I want as much information as possible. I want to be able to process it, figure out what works, what doesn't, what I like using, what I don't like using. But then you let your eyes see the game, and you know the personality of the player, and you know how they can handle certain things in certain situations.
Right.
So yeah, you're not letting the numbers just run the game. And I think that's a
Right.
perception that's out there where
Yeah.
like, oh, the front offices are running the game.
Yeah, that is the perception.
I can tell you right now, I've yet to have one person from our front office come down and tell me what I should have done in a game, or how to run the next game, or like, that's not how we operate. I can tell you that in St. Louis.
Right.
Like, we request a certain amount of information from our analytics department. They provide it to us. Our coaches go through it. Game starts, we're prepped, and we go execute. I personally have actually invited our analytics department to come down every series, and we find it productive to say, all right, what did you like? What did you not like about what took place in this series? And allow them to speak. It gives them a voice of speaking into, hey, you made this decision. Can you tell us why you used this guy instead of this guy when
Right.
this said it should have been him?
Right.
And you go through and you talk through it. And sometimes you leave and you go, man, you know what? They're right. I should have done it that way. And there's times where they go, oh, we didn't know that. We didn't have that piece of information. We didn't know that about that player.
Right.
And therefore, that makes a lot of sense. Because there's times where you make a bad decision that turns out good.
Right.
And no one ever questions it. But when you sit in the office and you're reviewing the game, you go, I made this decision, it sucked, and it worked out. don't do it again. Okay? And there's times you make a good decision that doesn't turn out, and you sit there in the office and you're getting hammered for it, and you go, no, you stick with that.
Yeah.
Because over time, that'll work. So you have
because of the numbers, or because of situations.
Sometimes because of the numbers and how they play out over time, and sometimes because of what you know about a player, what you're trying to develop or instill in that player, and you go, hey, it didn't work this time, but I'm gonna stick with him,
Right.
and not give up, because if we get him to be able to do that, then we're in a much better position as a club.
Yeah.
So there's times where things don't work out, and you make sure you have the right people around the table speaking into, hey, no, we got to stick with that. And there's times where you make decisions that you shouldn't make that turn out, and you go, don't, let's not do that again.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Well, what are those? Let me ask you this: what are those conversations like with the player? Because you mentioned honesty, and sometimes I'm assuming some of those conversations may be, hey, the numbers say this about whether or not you should start today against this lefty or this righty, or the numbers say this, or this is what I'm thinking. Do those conversations happen, and how tough are those conversations? Because obviously those are numbers driven.
they do, and you have to be careful in how much information you give the player. Players are good because they think they could take on anything.
Right.
The last thing you want to do is, no, you can't.
No.
And here's why, because the numbers say you can't hit this guy, right? Like, you want them believing. It's okay for you to be mad at me as the manager. I'd rather you be mad at me for making a decision than me sitting and proving to you why you can't play today.
Right. Yeah.
That's just for my ego, right? I can sit here and spit out numbers left and right and make you feel like you can walk out of my office thinking, damn, maybe I shouldn't play today, right? But what good does that do you?
Right.
So I'd rather you pin it on me and say, dude should have played me today. Perfectly fine. When I know, guess what? We got two other options ahead of you that probably will produce better, and therefore, like, you're not playing today.
Right.
So do you have tough conversations? Yes. Do I try to leave some of that out of it? Yeah, because the last thing you want to do is prove to the player that they shouldn't play.
Right.
So yeah, there's tough conversations. This is why it always goes back to honesty. Like, if you're honest with them as to why you're making certain decisions, but you don't have to divulge the entirety of why they're not playing. Yeah.
That streamline of information is interesting to me, and I think it's cool how you mentioned you have sit downs with the analytics team, right?
Yeah.
You try to learn kind of, okay, what maybe we could have did differently, or maybe what we should prepare for moving forward into the next series. What does that information look like in real time during the game? Sixth, seventh inning, you got to figure out, do I need to pull this guy out? Who am I going with in the bull? Am I looking at the specific numbers in real time, and how do you go about that process?
No, that's the showing up at 10:30 in the morning. You're prepped for that, right? Like, I can run through, once the game starts, I can tell you what matchups look like. I can tell you what our pen looks like compared to their bench, and how they're going to mix and match, and how I want to use my leverage guys against theirs. So, like, you already have that part mapped out, right? You map out, if things go well, here's how I want to use my pen, here's how I want to use my bench.
Right.
And you also do worst case scenario. If things don't work out, here's how we want to use our pen, and here's how we want to use our bench guys. And you go through all those individual matchups. But once the game starts, you want to play the game. You want to feel the game. You want to see the game. And I already, I have the majority of that memorized. I do have stuff on me that reinforces just certain notes that I want to make sure I don't miss on. But from, hey, this head-to-head matchup has a projected 640 OPS against this guy and the 710 against it, like, that stuff you already kind of have prepped for in how you want to navigate and execute a game plan. But there is a ton of information out there, man, and can some of it paralyze you? Yes. Are managers under more scrutiny because of how much information's out there and your ability to prove decisions being good over time or not? Absolutely. So it'd be dumb not to understand it in a way to inform future decision making. So do I understand it? Yes. Does it run the game? That's probably not the best way to even think of the question, right? Like, it's the more information you have about how decisions get made and how they turn out over time, like, you want that, and then you allow the human side to take place.
Well, I think a lot of times now we kind of see the game as a simulation, or at least like people think that the game can be simulated beforehand, right? And I think that even as a younger manager, a lot of times the notion is, okay, he's all analytics, right? Like because he's been brought up in this age. So I asked like the scale of like most analytic manager and like least analytic manager. Where would you find yourself on that scale?
Dude, tough question.
And I know it may not even be important,
No,
but like that, I think the question may be interesting because I think that people have a notion about certain things, right? Like if you're young, okay, this dude's all analytics.
If you're young, that is the perception, is they're bringing you in to basically run the game for you, right? I was brought up by some pretty old school mentality. It's a tough question, like on a scale of 1 to 10, like I love as much information as possible. And that's analytic information. That's my coaches coming to me and letting me know, hey, I had a conversation with this guy. His marriage isn't doing well. His kids sit. Like that's information. Like I want all of it.
Yeah.
Like give me. That's why I give everybody a seat at the table when it comes to coaches, analytic department. Like I want you give me as much information as possible. I'll process it. I'll figure out how to use it. That's my job. That's what this seat entails, right? So like I want all of it. Let me process it. Let me figure out what's actionable, and then let's go into this game.
Yeah.
So on a scale, I'm not sure how to answer that other than like I love information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you deal with Hall of Fame personalities? I think that's because you mentioned something about Pujols, right? And kind of talking to him. And I think like we could talk about Pujols for hours, right? But how do you deal with a personality like Pujols? How do you deal with a personality like Yadi or Molina and what those guys, where it may differ and what that communication looks like? Especially with so much time in the game too, with them.
They've earned a tremendous amount of respect, and you treat them that way because they've earned it.
Yeah.
Where you have issues arise, like when you haven't earned it and you're expecting it. Those guys have played the game.
You've had players like?
Those guys have played the game a certain way where, man, like, they've earned every bit of that. So I had a blast managing Albert. I mean, an absolute blast. One, he's an unbelievable human, an unbelievable player. But I enjoyed every second of that. Like having him and Yadi and Waino. Like you talk about your first 2 years of managing, you get these personalities in your clubhouse. I was, again, having honest conversations. Like, I loved game planning with Yadi. Absolutely loved it. Like every second of it. And there's times where we had differing opinions where I'd come in and say, here's what I'm thinking about doing. He's like, I wouldn't do that. And there's times where he'd come in and say, hey, let's do this. And I'm like, we'd go back and forth. And there's times where he was right. And at the end of the game, you make eye contact and you're like, that boy, nice job. And there's times where I was and there was respect there and you go back and forth and he's texting you at night saying, hey man, here's what I was thinking here, good decision here. And you have that back and forth that is meaningful.
Now let me ask, is that, excuse me for interrupting, is that more about pitching decisions or is that more, when you're specifically speaking about Yadi?
Sometimes it's pitching, sometimes it's lineup, sometimes it's more playing time for a certain player that may not be getting it. Like, hey, here's what I'm seeing with this guy, what do you think? So we had a relationship where we can go back and forth and in the heat of the moment, be able to laugh about certain things. Because like, that's one thing. Yadi was incredible at, in the heat of the moment, still slowing the game down enough to pick up on so many other things. And when you know how he's thinking about something and where he's trying to go, and you're game planning with him, it's a heck of a lot of fun. So managing, to your question, those big personalities of Albert and Waino and Yadi, like I enjoyed it, and it prepares you for future conversations, right? Like I was listening to an interview of an NFL coach, and he's talking about, man, when I'm prepping for these exit meetings and I'm sitting down with the Tom Brady, for example, like you prepare in such a way where you want to make sure you don't miss anything or you're not making anything up. Like you're so prepared for that meeting because he'd call you out.
Right.
If you're
So detailed.
Yeah, if you're pulling something out of your ass, right? So like what he then said was, and I learned that I can navigate a conversation with the rookie and not be as prepared, but that's not fair to the rookie. So like what it's taught me with Albert and with Wayno and Yadi is like the same way you prepare to have a conversation with those guys, Mason Wynn deserves the same level of attention to detail and preparation when I have a conversation with him. Like he deserves that.
Right.
Jordan Walker deserves that. So like you learn to prepare in a way that you can have a conversation with a Hall of Famer and you prepare the same way for that rookie because one day hopefully he's in those same shoes.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's good and that's strong because as a former player, it makes me think about the development side. And because those conversations are a part of developing as a young player. Yeah. You mentioned some young players in Mason Wynn, Jordan Walker. Like I think about being a rookie and trying to figure out how to navigate playing every day, but also who's my manager? Like what is his personality? How are we gonna vibe? And you mentioned a word earlier, empathy. That's huge for young players because they're going to feel something different every single day. Yeah. I guess how do you move from a season of success in 2022 and then 2023? What was the toughest part of 2023 for you as a person and then as a manager?
You feel like you're letting a city down. You've prepared. This will be year 18 for me with the organization. You wake up every morning figuring out how to make St. Louis Cardinals great. And when you are at the head of it all and you have a season like we did in 23, you're responsible. I should be held responsible. I'm the manager of the team. Like it does fall on me. So that part of it was extremely tough. Like it's something you're sitting there in May and June, you're hoping the season flips and it doesn't. So the toughest part in any clubhouse is when you have high achieving mentality and then you have certain players that have a mediocre mentality. It's tough to get everybody on the same page. So we often talk about, man, we want to create a culture that pushes you up or pushes you out. And all year we felt like we were trying to push everyone in the same direction. Yeah. And at times you have to hit the reset button. And that's what this offseason was. And I feel really good about it. We brought in some really, really good personalities that know how to lead. Guys that have been around the league that aren't going to be wide-eyed, that understand what winning looks like, what understands the high and the lows look like, and don't ride that emotional roller coaster. So the toughest thing was probably that. Yeah. And I think we're going to be a lot better for it. Sometimes it takes getting punched in the mouth to be able to head in the right direction, and we experienced that.
I like how that leads to a new excitement for 2024, right? Because it's like, okay, Cardinals, we know that is not the team we're used to seeing. Yeah. How do they get back on track? And I think that, to me, is exciting because you almost get to see where Marmol puts his footprints, right, where his fingerprints on. And I think one of the areas is going to be development with some of those young players. How do you go about, as a manager, player development at the big league level? Because I guess we're expecting the players to already know what they're supposed to do 24/7. And you have young players on the team that will make a huge impact. Yeah. How do you go about player development?
For me, it comes down to accountability. You develop through accountability. And you need people to be able to speak accountability into your everyday routine. But doing it in a way where it doesn't create conflict. And that's the toughest thing. So one thing I learned from one of my mentors, he was great at this. He basically said, okay, when you talk about developing a player, you bring them into the room. This is something I do, and you say, all right, what do you want for yourself? X, what do you want for yourself this year? All right, and then what do you want for your career? And then allow me to tell you what I want for you this year and what I want for your career. Wow. And at the end of that conversation, once we put all the cards on the table, I say, can I hold you accountable to this? So now I'm asking you permission to hold you accountable throughout the course of the year. When things don't look right and you're doing something that's not pointing in the direction to allow you to do what you just said you wanted to do, then I get to call you out for it. Yeah. Okay. So now I've removed myself. It's not me against you. It's not personal.
It's what we already established.
This is what you want for yourself, and I'm going to hold you to that. and you've given me permission to hold you to
Yeah.
that. So when it's June and you're not running something out and you don't feel good, and whatever the case may be, and you're making excuses, I get to pull you aside and say, hey, big boy,
Yeah.
we talked about this is what you want for yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm holding you to that. And it creates an environment where it's not personal. It's just, I want you to achieve what you want to
Yeah.
achieve for yourself.
Yeah.
And by you doing that, it helps the club. So therefore, like, accountability is what leads to growth.
I love that because I had a conversation with Gary Sheffield on this same show, and he literally spoke about the same thing. Like, he mentioned he had a manager in Jim Leland that said, this is what I expect of you. And what it was Hall of Fame level. This is not what you're going to expect of certain players, right? But he said, I want you to be the best player on the field. Whoever we're playing against. And he mentioned playing against Barry Bonds, and there was days maybe he didn't bring his best to the table, and Jim Leland, hey, you're supposed to be the best on the field that day. So I think that makes a lot of sense, and it challenges a player to be the best version of themselves.
Yeah, and a player, I mean, think about it. As a player, if I say my expectations for you are so high, and that is why I'm sharing this with you, because I think you can actually pull this off. It's hard to be mad at me for that, right? Like, I think this is possible for you, but the only way you're going to get here is if you stay on track, and I want you to stay on track.
Right.
So your ability to do that without making it personal, that accountability is what leads to growth. Yeah.
I like that. Okay, there was a situation that happened last year on a different team, the Blue Jays. And I want to kind of get your idea as to how you might react to this or what a conversation might be. So at the end of the year, they had played, obviously, the Twins. There was a situation where maybe analytics came into the game and they removed the starting pitcher, and we saw a reliever go in. And after the series, there was talks that it was the manager's decision. It was something that was talked about with analytics and the GM or the president of operations before the game. Let me ask you about those conversations with the president, with Mo.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and say Mo. What are those conversations like with Mo when it comes to on-field issues or decisions?
He keeps it really simple. I've never left a conversation with Mo where I don't feel heard. And that's important as a leader. When you're in his position, you have so much coming at you from the baseball side to non-baseball stuff, and to really be present enough to sit there and truly listen to people and them feel heard is a great quality. I will tell you, he has never walked in, not once, and recommended anything for on-field play. His answer to that is always, I hired you to do a job. You make the decision. And that's fair. Like, as the manager of the team, it is on you to figure out how to best use the pieces you have to win. So he doesn't speak into that, which I don't know I know it's not the norm in other organizations.
Well, that's why I asked you, because I, from your perspective, I wanted to know what the norm was and what you thought, because I think we have this idea that, okay, whatever the president tells you, whatever the GM tells you, that's what needs to happen on the field. And sometimes we have this idea that they're interjecting on what goes on the field. So that's different when we talk about John Mozeliak.
Very different. Like, I can honestly, there's not one time he's walked in and recommended what needed to take place on the field. Not once. And no one from that department has ever come down and recommended what needs to take place on the field. So if there's a decision made that people don't like, you can point right over here.
I love that. I love it. Because and I guess I'll ask you, what is that, your voice being heard? Obviously, you just said you don't leave a conversation without being heard. What are tough conversations like with Mo? Is there conversations that may be tough that deal with, I guess, roster? Maybe you feel like a certain player should be here, maybe they're not here, or maybe we need an addition.
Yeah, and you have those, and sometimes the answer is no.
Yeah.
You know, but I can also tell you this: there's times where I've said, "Hey, this guy, we need to give him a break. We need to get him out of here. Let's make this move." And he says, "No, be patient." And you go 15, 20 days, and I look back and I go, and I'm glad we didn't make that call, because now he's contributing, he's got more confidence, and he's playing well.
Right.
And I would have given up too soon, right? So, like, there's times where you don't get what you want, and it's a good thing. And then there's times where you have the conversation, you say, hey, man, like, this is what is going on in the clubhouse.
Yeah.
We need this type of personality injected into the clubhouse. What's the way of doing that? And you get it. But it's a back and forth. It's a collaboration. At the end of the day, Mo wants to win a World Series.
Right. Yeah.
Bill DeWitt wants to win a World Series.
Yeah.
I want to win a World Series. Those guys in the like, it's now front office against everybody's together wanting the same exact thing. So being able to have transparent, honest, genuine conversations back and forth and how you get there is the key to all of it. And I can say that Mo and his group works really well with our staff. Like, I have a good relationship with them, but then how they interact with our field staff is, I find it hard to believe that there's a better situation.
Wow. That's cool to hear, because, you know, a lot of times, even as a player, you don't know what that relationship is like, you know, and sometimes you're thinking that this person here thinks that they're above everybody else. And I like hearing the idea that there's collaboration there, obviously, and everybody's trying to win. One of my favorite things about you is a great ejection. What is the key to a great ejection?
Man.
We got iPad throwing. We got telling umpires they need to beat it.
Oh, man.
Their time is up.
You're incredible. I don't think they could find you twice for the same incident, right? So, no, you don't want to get ejected. Honestly, I never want to get ejected. But you also have to have your players back.
Yeah.
And I try to be fairly stoic. You know, the camera's always on you, but you can flip the switch pretty quickly.
Yes, you can.
Listen, you're competitive, man. Like, you're in every single moment of wanting to win, and when you feel like something's going against you that shouldn't, like, I sometimes lose it. But the majority of the time is to make sure that the players know that I have their back. I had a conversation actually with a couple umpires, and it changed my perspective to a certain, like, man, they have families, right? And you're ripping them in front of 40,000 people. And are we in the entertainment business? Yeah, once they ring you, like, get your money's worth. But you also have to keep in mind that they're human too,
right?
And they're gonna miss some stuff. I just rather than miss it when I'm not manager.
New personalities on the team. Obviously, a lot of moves made this offseason. You have some pitching, which is important. How are we feeling about what excites you most about going into 2024?
The personalities that are brought in. It's a big deal. Sonny Gray's a competitor.
Yeah.
He's wired in a way where he just wants to kill, and I love that. I mean, you look at Lance Lynn, similar personality. He is big on accountability. He's going to hold people to a certain standard. He has his way of doing it that works. And then Gibby, everything I hear about this guy, I mean, he's a great clubhouse guy who's going to be super encouraging. He's going to bring guys alongside. But the biggest thing about the three of those specifically, and we brought in some guys via trade, Robertson, you go down that list. But the big thing about those three in the starting rotation is they want to be great, but they have a passion for bringing others alongside with them.
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference, right? When you think about building a legacy and not just winning a World Series, but building a sustainable culture that wins several World Series over time, you have to have personalities that want to be great, that know a high level standard, but also bring people alongside with them and aren't just into themselves. And these three guys do that well.
Yeah, you said something that resonated with me, and it's kind of been a theme of this, is like the legacy that you leave, whether it's an organization, whether it's you as a person, the personality that you bring in. For you personally, what is it that you want people to know about you, or that you want to leave this game? Like, what if people said, okay, this is what Ollie was about during his time in Major League Baseball, what is it that you would want them to know?
It probably has nothing to do with baseball, to be honest with you. When I think of legacy, you think about impacting people's lives. Yes, you want them to have a longer career because you were a part of it, right? That you brought certain value to them that allowed them to play for longer, play better. But the game ends, and then you still have a whole lot of life left. And can I speak into that in a way where you're a better husband, a better father, and you enjoy the things outside of baseball? Like, my identity is not wrapped in this seat. One day I won't hold it, and it'll be just fine. that's just the reality of it, right?
Right.
Like you look at the industry, you see managers bounce from team to team. They get fired, they get hired, they get fired, they get hired, and some stay in certain places for a long time. At the end of the day, like I don't get too wrapped up in that, because like my identity isn't in being a big league manager.
Right.
I'm here, and God put me here for a reason. And if I don't use that platform well, then I'll have regrets.
Yeah.
But from a legacy standpoint, I want to impact lives of the guys that are in that clubhouse in a way where their lives are enriched because I was a part of it. And if I'm not doing that, then that's where I'm not doing it well.
Well, that's why I brought you on this show, is because I understand that it's bigger than baseball. And I think that's a lot of what my messaging is to athletes, people in the industry, is like, and I had something said to me while I was playing, is like, okay, you have baseball, you will play for 3 to 4 innings of your 9-inning life. Like, what are you going to do with those 5 other innings? And I think that speaks a lot to the impact that you can have on other people. And that's why I appreciate you as a person first, because I know that's important to you. And when we speak about impact, I think there's people that look up to you. And, okay, I wish I could be in his shoes one day, be a big league manager, be able to have impact on people's lives. What would you want those people to know? Or what is the advice that you would give to those people that would want to be in your shoes one day?
Don't worry about being in my shoes. Like, care about the people that are around you today. That's all I did. Like,
Yeah.
I got a call for the job, and I mean, honestly, it wasn't like something I was aspiring to do and I want to be able to be, like, I was just caring for the people that were around me every day, whether that was in Johnson City, Tennessee, and then Batavia, New York, and State College, and then Palm Beach.
Wait, you were able to do it in Batavia, New York? Only because I know how
Hey,
tough that how
people in
tough that
Batavia
is.
are watching. No.
Shout out to Batavia.
But you care for those that are around you. And when I say that, like, truly care about them as people, not their performance.
Yes.
And nothing's better than getting, and I got one of these recently, and it was a letter from a minor league player that I was tough on. I was tough on him. And the letter started off by saying, "Now I get it." And that, like, dude, that speaks to my heart a ton, because it's like, now I get it. Now I understand why. And when you start to think of all the conversations that you had with him, and the times you were hard on him, and the times you wrote him pretty good, and then to get this letter 10 years after managing him, and he's saying, "Man, I'm doing this in life now, and I get it. I understand why you had this conversation. I understand why you pried in this certain area of my life. I understand why you got on me for this, and I'm doing well, and here's why I'm doing well." And you feel like you played a part in that. Enough for him to handwrite a letter 10 years later, then you know you had an impact. And in the moment, did it feel good for that? No.
Right.
He hated it,
Right.
right? But you knew that at some point this will make sense to you and you'll be better for it. So when I think of, like, advice to give the next group that wants to be in my shoes, is don't worry about getting to the top. Don't worry about holding the job and what comes with it, and like, none of that matters. Care about the people that are with you right now, and care for them well, in a way where when they speak of you, or if you weren't to show up today, they would notice, and they'd miss it, and they'd want it. And if you do that well over time, then at some point you'll pick your head up, and there's not much more else to go when you talk about going to the top.
Yeah, I love that, because it's so relational. And I think a lot of times we lose fact of that in sports, in baseball. It's like the relationships are the most important things. And when guys retire, what do they say? Like, I miss those relationships, right? The clubhouse, being around the guys, like, that's the biggest thing a lot of times. So I think that is the whole thing about all of this, because that's something that you can take after the game. And that's what I want people to know too, is like, I'm grateful for the relationships the game has given me, because those will take you further than you could ever imagine.
No doubt. And that's why, I mean, you talk about guys that have a tough time transitioning once they're out of the game. It's because of that, right?
Yeah.
So even in a tough year like last year, man, where I would have had even more regret is if we didn't use a tough season to grow certain areas of different players, right?
Yeah.
I look at Goldie and Nada, and I can go down the list of Donovan and Newbar, and man, they're different because of it.
Yeah.
And if you don't use that time well, then it's a terrible season.
Right.
But at least you can pull something from it that prepares you and puts you in a position to have success moving forward. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome, man. Well, I appreciate
No doubt.
you coming on Show and Go with X. I appreciate our relationship, and keep doing your thing, my man.
No, I appreciate you, man. Thank
Appreciate you.
You got it.